So what is Heat Vision and Jack, you might ask? It is a pilot which was written by Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab. And I've heard various different stories, and I want to credit this podcast called Who's Piloting This, which I listened to today. And some of it, I'm not sure. I couldn't find it 100% verified on some of this, but if you want to listen to that, it's all right. It's not an amazing podcast, to be honest with you. It's no pizza party. But it was created by Rob Schrab and Dan Harmon. I've heard to get out of a contract with ABC. They had a deal with them, and they basically wanted to create something stupid that they would pass on, but then they had a lot of fun with it and really liked doing it, and they made this thing called Heat Vision and Jack. What it is about a astronaut who flies too close to the sun, and our brains are sort of like cookie dough, and when they get hot, they expand. And so Jack, anytime the sun is out, becomes 3 times smarter than the smartest man alive and has genius level intelligence. Then when it's night, he becomes a normal man. And then Heat Vision is his friend who was transformed and melded with a motorcycle by a secret government experiment laser. It's supposed to call back to the $6 Million Man and Manimal and things of that nature. Jack was played by Jack Black, and then Heat Vision was voiced by Owen Wilson. And this was directed by Ben Stiller, who does a pretty funny intro at the beginning of this where he talks about how he won an Emmy. Now, Ben Stiller at this time, and he's kind of the key to how this all happened, basically. He found the script somehow, and he absolutely loved it. I think he might have been friends with them or something, but it doesn't matter. He found it. And because at the time he was just coming off of There's Something About Mary, and he was hot, and TV producers were listening to him. Now, ABC passed, NBC slightly considered it, then Fox picked it up. They had a history with Ben Stiller from the Ben Stiller Show. Now, the Ben Stiller thing is interesting because Ben Stiller at this time, he was, after There's Something About Mary, he hadn't fully become a movie star, but he was more, he made this show called The Ben Stiller Show, which was sort of a I think it was pre-Mr. Show. It's more alternative comedy type of thing. And Ben Stiller was sort of more in that mode at the time. He hadn't gone full Meet the Parents, basically. This more plays into those sensibilities. This whole pilot plays more like a sketch. And when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, this is more like the Ben Stiller Show Ben Stiller. And maybe this is the last gasp of it. He directed it, and it became the most expensive pilot 20th Century Fox had ever produced. They kept needing more money to do all the cheesy effects and silly things and pay everybody high salaries and all. It just got ridiculous, and of course it didn't get picked up. Now, because it is sort of like an extended sketch of a joke of a thing, I can sort of see that. It plays like a live-action Adult Swim show does now, and I can see it maybe being like a 6-episode thing or something like that. I really honestly can't see it being like a real show. This came out in 1999. You get Jack Black before he's a movie star. Owen Wilson hadn't really become as big yet. The Royal Tenenbaums would come out the next year, to give you further context. But it wasn't picked up and became kind of a cult thing, basically, and it sort of leaked on the internet post after that. You also have Ron Silver, who plays the Hollywood actor Ron Silver, who's also an FBI agent, which is a funny bit they do. This is a fun pilot, and it's worth a watch, actually. Last night I actually poured a glass of whiskey and watched it and had a good time with it. But it's sort of like a weird kind of funny short film. And they even kind of act like it's an episode. It says episode 14, despite being the pilot. Like, it's sort of like a lot of 70s shows were like people just like drifters wandering on the road, which is such a 70s thing. Now that just sounds like a depressing drama, which I would be into a show called Drifter, called that. But much like The Incredible Hulk, basically. If you ever saw that show with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, that they just kind of go from town to town, and Jack rides Heat Vision and so forth. And they kind of find this guy who picks up a weird frequency that's like an alien. It infects him, takes him over, and he becomes like this alien guy. And the Heat Vision and Jack have to stop it, and they run into the sheriff there, played by Christine Taylor, who she would later become Ben Stiller's wife. They actually met making this pilot, which is kind of interesting. It is a really funny pilot, and I'd heard about it before. If you ever watched the channel Trio in the early 2000s, they had a thing like Brilliant But Cancelled, and did specials and documentaries on like pilots that were kind of notorious, and this is one they talked about a lot. And they had interviews with Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab, who did a lot of press for like this ridiculous pilot that got made, but I think it became more infamous because, all these people would go on to be a lot bigger, and Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab for a long time weren't part of that. Actually, they were kind of just like these writers who had this weird pilot and nothing happened to, and then Dan Harmon created Community, and then Rick and Morty, and Rob Schrab almost directed Lego Movie 2, and directed all the Mystery Science Theaters, and has done a lot of cool stuff. Basically almost everyone involved in this pilot has become a lot bigger since, making this pilot a lot bigger of a deal. It actually has some funny jokes. Like, I love the theme song. Sort of reminds me of how the Rick and Morty theme song calls back to 70s and 80s sci-fi stuff. Sort of reminds me of Heat Vision and Jack as well. You can sort of sound not too many common things with that. It's sort of like very early Dan Harmon, before Community and all those things. But one of the funny jokes I wrote down in my notes was that this one backs up to the jukebox, and a Third Eye Blind Semi-Charm Kind of Life plays, and it was like cuts the tension in the scene, like just ruins it. But it's like, it actually made me laugh. And I was, even that time period, I was so used to hearing Third Eye Blind that the fact that it made me laugh, I never liked Third Eye Blind, but it made me laugh, which is pretty crazy. I'd actually seen this pilot before I really knew who Dan Harmon was. And I think this is pre-Channel 101 really for him. He'd go on to make that as well after this. But I didn't really know Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab. I watched this originally when someone had a bootleg of it as a Ben Stiller show kind of thing. And it's interesting watching it in a whole new light since then. And I still find it, like, if you like Dan Harmon, it's worth checking out. There'll be a YouTube link in the description down below. If someone wants to put it in the chat, sorry, I don't have the link on me right now. But you should check it out. It's a cool, fun pilot if you're thirsty for some more Dan Harmon stuff. It's definitely worth checking out. You won't be disappointed with your half hour. I had a good time with it. There always talk of like making a movie out of it or an animated series. Nothing too confirmable or movement on that if it actually happened. Some people are saying, well, Jack Black's not doing anything, so maybe he could. I mean, sure. I don't think this would be like a huge thing, to be honest with you. I think it's just like a funny, weird idea that got way out of control. And, it's just like people riffing on these weird 70s sci-fi things like Manimal and things of that nature. It's a fun pilot. It's one of the more infamous pilots in TV history. It really is. And it's become even more infamous because you have Ben Stiller, Owen Wilson, Jack Black, Christine Taylor, Ron Silver, but also Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab, who created like one of the most noteworthy pilots of all time that literally didn't become anything. Should it have become anything? Probably not. If they had pitched it to Adult Swim and Adult Swim had been what Adult Swim was 10 years later, maybe it could have been something, but it was also way too damn expensive. It's sort of like an interesting, odd, funny pilot, and the last kind of remnants of kind of the alternative comedy Ben Stiller and the Ben Stiller Show that probably none of you watching really remember at this point anyway. So it's sort of like an odd little Dan Harmon, Ben Stiller kind of like, sometimes I like watching weird things where you get all these people at these weird points in their career and you get this kind of weird concoction of what it was, and it just very Generation X, very much of that time, those kind of references, but I kind of love it for all those things, and Heat Vision and Jack just embodies that so well. It's like the perfect kind of weird 70s Generation X sort of riff sort of thing with that really fun Dan Harmon humor. I want to say thank you very much, Austin, for making me do this. I'm really happy I did that. And by the way, this should be Austin. Great job, and great job as always.